Good morning, everyone. So it's 10:30. We can get started with the first talk of the day. Let's welcome Brian. So he's going to talk about CentOS Stream today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Brian Stinson. I work on CentOS Stream full-time for my day job at Red Hat. And notice if you're listening on the recording, there's a number of folks on my team here in the audience, and I told them that they were going to help me give this talk. So, but we'll walk through just a couple of things today. We'll talk about kind of the idea behind CentOS Stream. What's it for? What do different people get out of it? But I'm going to spend a big chunk of time just talking about what's available, because and what you can use those individual artifacts for, because I get a lot of questions out on mailing lists and IRC and all of that stuff about, I'm used to consuming either Fedora or CentOS Linux or stuff like that. What's different about Stream? And we'll talk about maybe some similarities and maybe some strategic differences that we're doing in the project and with Stream itself to kind of highlight what you should be doing. So let's start off with, what is Stream really for? Like, what are we going to do with it? And if you ask me to put my Red Hat on, we serve a large community within Red Hat itself, because Red Hat uses CentOS Stream to make RHEL. If you look out, I'm sure a number of you may have seen the repositories in GitLab.com, but that's really the place where Red Hat maintainers take code from Fedora, from upstream communities, from other places or patches that they develop themselves. And they use that to actually make it into the Red Hat Enterprise Linux operating system. And so how do they do that? Because it's kind of that balance you got to create between stuff that you show in the public and then all of the things that you have to do in the private. If you've seen someone give a talk about CentOS Stream before, you've probably seen this diagram, and this is how, Adam is here in the audience. It's actually a really, really good encapsulation of how we actually make this happen at Red Hat. So we start over here on the left. You notice you start with a pull request to GitLab.com. And there's a number of things that are involved with that. Typically, we ask folks to file a Bugzilla first. So bugzilla.redhat.com, which we'll talk about here in a minute. You want to add a new feature. You go out, you file a bug, and then it's fixed via a pull request to the actual code itself. And a Red Hat maintainer, a RHEL maintainer, actually controls that process. They affect the merge and then get the code into different places. But you can kind of see there's two parallel pipelines here. One of them, the top one, is out in the public infrastructure that you all can see if you go out to the various properties that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. And then there's a private infrastructure that is actually how we generate the RHEL bits. And you can see there are a number of stages. We sync and coordinate build activity. We also sync and coordinate what we call gating, and that's a way that RHEL maintainers can take internal tests and tests that they have. Maybe they pulled some unit tests from upstream or other scenarios, and they put it into this. Some folks are automated testing scenarios. Some folks have manual testing scenarios. But the gating actually controls the status of a package as it makes it through this entire pipeline. And so, one of the questions we get quite a bit is, what sort of testing is run? How do I know that this is, something that I want to put on my machine? And the answer is, it's actually controlled by Red Hat gating and a couple of other tests that are run, even earlier here in the process. And so a package makes it all the way through. Let's say that the tests go well. We have a good build and all of that stuff. It branches off in at the end there, and you all can consume it in what we call a compose. And so a compose you can think of as just a snapshot in time of what CentOS Stream would look like with all the collections of packages that exist at one point or another. And as we move forward, as new packages pass gating, as new builds come in, that compose moves just forward all the time. We don't do. You might be familiar in the past with minor releases or something like that we've done in the CentOS project. That's not a thing that we do anymore. Stream always moves forward. So what do we use CentOS Stream for? And by we, I mean those of us who have public access to all of the bits. Running interesting workloads. We were actually just talking about a few folks that are using Stream to preview what's coming in the next minor release of RHEL. Because if you remember, since we're doing all of this stuff in parallel, everything that makes it into Stream is nominally destined for a future RHEL minor release. It's for finding and filing bugs early. And so if you're familiar with maybe CentOS Linux in the past, or maybe even some of the downstream rebuilds that have popped up after the CentOS Linux retirement, typically you find yourself in a situation where you start on a minor release and you run your workload on it, and you end up finding a bug. The problem with that is, if you're pinned on that one minor version and you open a bug, it may be 6 months, a year, or something like that before you actually have rebuilt artifacts that you can try things out on. And there's no way for you to influence that process, because you're literally taking what Red Hat has released and kind of going from there. There's no way to affect the process in development. And so the easiest way you can think about CentOS Stream, if you want to boil it down to one bullet point, is this: starting conversations with package maintainers. And there's a lot of interesting work that you can do, and interesting things that you can do via merge requests or something like that if you want to contribute your own patch. But really, it's all about starting a conversation, whether you want to affect a new feature, or whether you want to fix a bug, or whether you just want to tell us that something isn't quite what you expect. Opening a Bugzilla on bugzilla.redhat.com in the public is one of the best ways that you can actually affect change through CentOS Stream, by running your interesting workloads on it. So go nuts. The only way you can find bugs is to actually run your services. And so, I wanted to give you an example of how this works. If you were here for the CentOS Dojo a couple of days ago, we were actually looking at an interesting feature in Network Manager. So this is a feature request. It's adding multipath TCP to Network Manager. If you're interested in that sort of thing, it's probably something that you want to follow on pretty closely, so that you can make sure that your configs work, and that maybe we didn't update anything in the configuration files that you wouldn't expect. But you can see, if you can read this entry in Bugzilla, the feature was actually logged a while ago. Let's see, that was December of 2021. And there was some back and forth on this ticket. To kind of give you an idea of what typically happens is, there's some back and forth on the ticket about whether the team wants to do this now, or if they want to wait for a new release of Network Manager, or maybe they have this planned in other parts. But to give you a little bit of an inside look, it was actually a couple of weeks ago when the team decided that this was ready to actually look at, ready to start the development on. And so they issued a public merge request. So this is an update to the Network Manager package. You can see that if you look on the breadcrumbs here, you can see that this is a merge request under gitlab.com/redhat. We've got the CentOS Stream namespace. That's where all of the the package configs go. But this merge request was tied to this Bugzilla, and it's an update to 1.39.90, which has this new multipath TCP case in it. And so, yeah, a couple of weeks ago, they had this. They decided to accept this work. This merge request was filed. I'm pretty sure it was on, like that would have been probably Wednesday. They affected a build in the CentOS Stream build system that's available publicly. And you can see that the version numbers do match up here, 1.39.90. So they affected a build about a day later after they issued the merge request. They got everything merged, affected a build. And then actually it was Friday I was checking on this. It turns out that it had made it all the way through this process. It had made it through roll gating, made it to the right place in the build system, and passed verification, and so it was ready for compose. And so I haven't. Today is Saturday. I haven't actually run a production compose for the day yet, but you can expect that package, the new network manager, is going to make it into the repositories probably sometime next week or so. And so that's really tight. You can think of beforehand, you would have to wait 6 months from when someone actually started the work to actually having a build that you can consume. To here, it's on the order of weeks. And every package, every update is a little bit different. Teams plan a little bit differently, but I think this is important that you can see change and try things out relatively quickly. And so that sort of brings up the question. You can see this is destined for CentOS Stream 9. But where does Stream itself fit in like the whole wide range of the ecosystem that involves Fedora and Red Hat Enterprise Linux as well? And I'm going to throw up a marketing slide because we do this in every Stream presentation as well. But this, you've probably seen this on a website there, on the Red Hat website. And you can see that CentOS Stream sits here sort of in the middle. And I mentioned this earlier because the CentOS Stream's purpose is really to affect the next minor release of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So we typically develop the next major version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux in Fedora. And there's some interesting activities. And if you're interested in these activities, you can talk to Adam and Troy after the talk here. But there's some interesting activities that happen during the bootstrap period of a new major release, and that's probably, if you've looked at the activity so far in Stream 9, up until a few months ago, you were seeing a lot of those major release activities. Starting from now on, you're going to see a little bit less activity, and that's okay. It's really features and bug requests that are destined for the next minor release. And so how do you consume it? Like what's available to you, and how can you, like what artifacts are out there so that you can run your workloads and file bugs and do all the interesting things? We still publish everything to the CentOS Mirror network. We actually made a new mirror network for Stream 9, but mirror.stream.centos.org is a good place to start. We have the 9 stream directory in there, plus all the special interest group content stored in that one place, and you can go and download your installer ISOs and all of that stuff. That's all located on the mirrors. We've recently consolidated all of this content, including things like the source RPMs and the debug infos. I know some of you who may be familiar with the CentOS project have found those in other places, typically on the Vault or the debug info service. With Stream 9, everything is delivered directly to the mirror network. So what could you use the CentOS Stream mirror network for? You should install it on your laptop. I've got Stream 9 on this laptop right here. I actually use it as my daily driver at home, and it helps me, number one, use the thing that we're producing, but number two, it lets me run things like, well, I spend most of my day in Google Chrome, to be honest, but that picks up enough bugs for me to file one or two every now and it makes the whole experience better. So that's how you get. If you're installing Stream on your laptop, I would recommend you go to the mirrors. But what about in your CI systems, or maybe some of the maybe you want to snapshot individual packages or see what's the latest. So typically we only push to the mirrors once a week, but the composes that we produce, we have a couple of different types. We generate the production composes, which you see right here, a little bit more than weekly, but those are the ones that you'll see out on the mirror network. We also have a number of development composes. So if you looked back in our diagram, anything that hadn't really passed gating yet, but was still sitting in the build system waiting for people to test and verify, that's the stuff that we put in the development composes, and those are generated nightly. You can find that on composes.stream.centos.org, and that's really, honestly, a better way to track the very latest and greatest coming out of Stream. The mirror network is good for laptops, and it's automatically enabled whenever you have your repositories on the system. But the composes location is great for finding the latest. So put it in your CI systems, and again, it tracks the very latest out of the build system. The container images are another thing that is really important for when you want to consume this in your CI system. If you have a container workload, we do publish tags for both of those cases. Stream 9 corresponds to the production composes. Stream 9-development is the latest and greatest that hasn't necessarily passed any sort of gating yet. And those are all stored on Quay.io. So how many of you actually maintain a set of container files on GitHub somewhere? Do you have Docker files out there? I know I've got a few of them just for other purposes. So I looked on github.com, and there were about 60,000 references to from CentOS in the container file type. And so that shows me that there's a lot of folks who have built up a lot of infrastructure and a lot of work around CentOS containers. And so switching to Stream 9 for your container workloads is going to be pretty awesome to do. I want to mention one thing. So this is once you have the bits, you can get involved in one of our special interest groups. A couple of them actually publish their documentation to sigs.centos.org, and each one will have different procedures for getting involved and contributing. But the SIGs are for building content on top of CentOS Stream. So you should join a special interest group. The SIGs actually use our community build system, and you'll see in this in this listing right here, you can see. I'll read this off to you. Looks like the hyperscale SIG was in the middle of building System D at the time. They end up replacing a number of core components in Stream, one of them being System D. And you can always go out to the community build system to get interesting packages or to find what the latest is from our special interest groups. And I mentioned this before, like one of the main purposes is to open a conversation. So if you find trouble either using SIG deliverables or Stream deliverables, go out to bugzilla.redhat.com and open a bug, request new features. Finally, if you're familiar with if you maintain packages in Fedora, you've probably heard of Fedora Copers. I will note that the CentOS Stream build routes for both CentOS Stream 8 and Stream 9 are available to you in that system. So that's a good way to try out new things. Even if you haven't joined one of our special interest groups yet, go out there and build your packages against Stream 8 and Stream 9. So that was a whirlwind tour of a few things that are available to you. Are there any questions? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, are we publishing messages for the CentOS Stream composes? We do publish some messages to the Fedora messaging bus when the composes are created, but not necessarily when they're pushed to the mirrors. That's something we have yet to do. So yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, Trey. Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is like, how do I open a Bugzilla and how do I route it to the right place? The Bugzilla entry that you go under bugzilla.redhat.com, you'll choose the major Red Hat Enterprise Linux version. So in this case, we've got a bug entry up here for RHEL 9, and there's a version drop down, and you can choose. If you're running RHEL itself, you can choose one of the minor releases. If you find a bug on 9.0, 9.1, whatever, that's part of that too. If you're running CentOS Stream, that version is available to you in the Bugzilla dropdown. Yeah, Adam. Yes. So the question is, what window managers are available to you? So by default, we publish the GNOME environment, but I know you can look over at Troy, and he's doing some work on KDE, and the folks in EPEL are doing looking at other environments as well. XFC is ready already. Awesome. Mate is almost there. Yeah. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so the string ups like really fast, and like if I use it as my daily laptop, like you, like how often should I update my system?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So like I typically just run a DNF update every week or so. It's up to you and your workload about what you sort of how often you want to consume that. I think I will mention one thing. So security fixes and bug fixes all come in the same stream for CentOS Stream. As too many uses of the word stream there, but security fixes and bug fixes all show up whenever they come in. So it's important to make sure that you have a strategy. I don't have a hard recommendation for you, but that's something you should keep in mind for your environment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just going to comment. Mine is more comments answering others.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's KDE, XFCE, Mate, i3, Lumina, IceWM.
Really?
Light for those are the desktops for desktop managers, which is like GDM. There's SDDM, which has its own issues, and LightDM.
Yeah.
For the other, I was gonna say it's a test that Fermilab and CERN did, and they found that they do once a month updates, and they found that they get the same number of updates whether they're running real RHEL versus the streams.
Yep.
They're ahead, yes, but as you said, they've all gone through the gating and stuff. They don't make it to that thing unless they've gone through the gating, and they were happy with the once a month.
Yep.
But I like your answer better. It's up to you what you want for your cabinet.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Troy. I'm kind of excited that i3 is ready. I need to try that out as soon as I get off the stage here. So with that, I'll hand it over, and thank you all for chatting with me today.
Thanks, Brian, for the lovely talk. I think we will have a 15-minute break. The next session will start at 11:15. Thank you for the patience, everyone. I think we are good to go for the second talk of the day. Let's welcome Carl for his presentation on the road to EPEL 9.
How are y'all doing today? So, show of hands here. Who has used EPEL 9 already? Good video. What about EPEL 8? Even more. What about EPEL 7? Some consistency there. What about 6? Yeah, some long-termers. 5? 4? Okay, a few of y'all been with us since the beginning. Excellent. So who here has delayed upgrading their operating system, their EPEL operating system that they're using it on, until a package they needed was in the next version of EPEL? Pretty much everybody. That sets the stage for what we're going to talk about today, the road to EPEL 9. My name's Carl George. I'm a principal software engineer at Red Hat. I'm Carl W. George on pretty much all the social medias and IRC and Matrix and all those things. And if you want to email me, it's just carl@redhat.com. Somehow I was able to get that alias. So based on the show of hands, pretty much everyone here knows what EPEL is, but just in case anyone's new or less familiar, EPEL stands for Extra Packages for Enterprise Linux. Quick sidebar, Enterprise Linux is a shorthand term we use to refer to Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or RHEL, and RHEL-compatible distributions. EPEL is a Yum repo of community-maintained packages for use on Enterprise Linux, and it's part of the Fedora project. So you might be wondering, where do EPEL packages come from? Note, this chart is not to scale. There's more than 90 packages in Fedora. But you can see here where it's kind of divided, and RHEL and CentOS are created from a subset of Fedora packages. Everything else in Fedora is eligible to be put into the EPEL repository. Not automatically, but it's eligible. That part right there is where the extra in the name, in the acronym, comes from. It's only additional packages for the base operating system, nothing that overlaps with it. So anything that's part of that subset can't go into EPEL. If anything gets added to that subset later, it's got to come out of EPEL. So I mentioned RHEL and CentOS are derived from that subset of Fedora packages. The way that happens has changed in recent years. So you can see the first line up here. These are old logos and kind of represents the old model. RHEL would be derived from Fedora, and then later the CentOS project would take the published RHEL sources and build another distribution with the goal of being as close to RHEL as possible. We call that a clone distribution typically. It's not identical, never has been, but the goal was always to be as close as possible. There are a few problems with clone distributions. First off, you can't really fix anything. You can't do much with it. It's got to be exactly what it's trying to clone. If you get a new bug report, then all the maintainers of the clone can do is, okay, I can reproduce this in the parent distribution, closed, works as expected. That's not really a good user experience, and it doesn't really build a good community. You also can't accept any contributions. It's just kind of an as-is thing, and even if you have a good idea for something that you know how to fix or a feature you want to add, anytime you do that, you'd be deviating from the parent distribution, which is against the mission. So that doesn't really work really well long-term for sustainability. We have a new model now. You see our new fancy logos. Now CentOS is derived from Fedora, RHEL is derived from CentOS, and then we still have other clone distributions like Alma Linux there that come along and still have the same mission that CentOS used to have of just reproducing what RHEL has. Now CentOS, since we're no longer, I used to be on the CentOS team inside Red Hat. Now I'm working on EPEL directly. Now CentOS, since we don't have to worry about matching RHEL, can work on actually getting better and improving the operating system. Even though it changes some, it's still very similar to RHEL. It's still bound by RHEL compatibility rules for a major version. And so, and what's in CentOS basically becomes the next RHEL minor version, a few months later, 3 to 6 months, something like that. That said, RHEL isn't completely static. And in some circumstances, you'll have changes that are going to happen in RHEL that happen in CentOS first, and they're a little bit different. And in some cases, those changes, when they happen in CentOS first, affect EPEL packages and whether or not they can install and work. In 2020, I proposed a solution for this called EPEL Next. We knew that EPEL mostly worked with CentOS and we wanted it to keep working, but we were running into small instances where some packages wouldn't install because of one of those library changes. So the idea we had was that have another repo, EPEL itself builds against RHEL, EPEL Next would build against CentOS, and then it would be optional and maintainers would only use it whenever they'd run into one of those, honestly, edge cases. It would happen about 1% of the time. We worked on this, got everything stood up for the infrastructure, and basically right away had a really good use case for it. RHEL was updating Qt from 5.12 to 5.15 in RHEL 8.5. I think that landed in November of 2020 and or in 2021, sorry. And we were able to get those EPEL updates ready in EPEL Next because the same change landed in CentOS a few months earlier. That it gave the maintainers opportunity to get those updates right and working, not just deliver the fix for CentOS users, but also made sure that they knew exactly what they needed to do a few months later when they did the same update in EPEL. So it wasn't just helping CentOS users, it also helped preparation for RHEL users for those packages. So we talked about this earlier during our show of hands, and we know that availability of packages in EPEL affects when people upgrade. We get consistent feedback about this, not just from community members, but also from RHEL customers. Eventually, that feedback got loud enough that Red Hat decided to take action to support EPEL. And I say support, I meant not to say that word. That is a very loaded word that means a lot of different things. So scratch that, I didn't say support. In 2021, Red Hat agreed to give additional headcount to the Community Platform Engineering Team, or CPE for short, in order to work on and sustain EPEL and make things happen. The ulterior motive here was really just, we know that we want customers to upgrade to the latest version of RHEL, and whenever it comes out, we want EPEL to be in a place where they feel they can use it. We're tired of hearing customers say, I can't upgrade because this community thing isn't ready yet. CPE's whole mission is providing engineering resources for Fedora and CentOS, so EPEL naturally kind of fits in with that. Historically, it's the same people working on it. People in CPE would typically be the same ones making EPEL happen in the past, but on a volunteer basis. Now with it officially staffed, we can do it as part of our day jobs, we can make it a priority, and we can plan for it ahead of time rather than just reacting when things are on fire. The first thing we had on the agenda was EPEL 9, of course, and being ready for RHEL 9. So we came up with the plan. It was a little bit hectic, but it made sense to us from an implementation perspective. We already had EPEL 8 next, or EPEL Next for RHEL 8, or for CentOS 8, Stream 8. We decided that our original plan was we would launch EPEL 9 Next first, built against CentOS Stream 9, and leave that as the only EPEL 9 repo for a little while. And then after the RHEL 9 launch, we would do a mass rebuild, all the packages that have been added to EPEL 9 Next, rebuild them against RHEL 9, and then use that to quickly populate the EPEL 9 repo. That would let us launch EPEL 9 quickly with the good number of packages very soon after the RHEL 9 launch, but not ready at the RHEL 9 launch. We were kind of expecting, a few days to maybe a week or two, and that was what we came up with, and that was the plan we were sticking with for a little while. It made sense to us from the implementation side. Each repo would just get set up once and just left alone and not changed. It would be set up as soon as it was possible to set it up the way it was supposed to be set up long term. But it made a lot less sense for packagers and for users. So as we started talking about this, explaining it to not just the community, but also to internal people inside Red Hat, we realized that it was really confusing. For package maintainers, we were explaining to them that we wanted them to build for EPEL 9 Next only for about 6 months, And then there would be the mass rebuild that they wouldn't have to do anything for. But then after that happened and after EPEL 9 launched, they would target EPEL 9 primarily and only build an EPEL 9 next when it was needed for library changes. It was also confusing for users. We were telling them, okay, for your CentOS boxes, use EPEL 9 next at first for about 6 months only. And then after EPEL 9 comes out, use EPEL 9 and EPEL 9 next. And if you're using RHEL, then maybe you can get some EPEL 9 next packages installed at the launch if you just can't wait, but don't leave it enabled because eventually you'll see 9.1 compatible packages when you're still on 9.0. So don't leave that enabled. And make sure to switch to EPEL 9 only once that exists. So just talking about it here, like y'all's eyes are glazing over and it's annoying. It's like, yes, this is a bad plan. This is not how we want to explain this. And this really dawned on us as we were trying to document it. Like, how do we explain this to people? Not just verbally, but in documentation where you don't have that verbal connotation and feedback where you can help explain and dive into parts of it. On top of all of that, there was also going to be the complexity and added work of doing a mass rebuild. This is something that Fedora release engineering does a lot in Fedora, but we hadn't really done it at this scale in EPEL before. So it was kind of an unknown thing that, okay, we're pretty sure this will work. There'll probably be a few curveballs. Some of our scripts aren't going to work right for the mass rebuild work, but we think we can do it. But no matter what, it was going to be more work and more complexity. The biggest problem of all, though, was that EPEL 9 wouldn't be ready on day one of RHEL 9. There was a lot of people that wanted to see that, both internally and externally. And all of that combined, we decided, all right, let's look at this plan and see what we could do to do something better. We came up with a new plan. Let's just set up EPEL 9. That's what people want. We knew that if we set it up early, building against CentOS Stream 9, that the packages almost guaranteed would work on RHEL 9 launch day. So we went ahead and set it up that way. EPEL 9 Next was also set up to build against CentOS Stream 9, and we launched them at the same. And the idea was we'd launch them at the same time, but not really focus on EPEL 9 Next. Just have it ready, and then it'll come into play later once it actually matters. Once 9.1 changes start landing in CentOS Stream 9. And then, of course, after the RHEL 9 launched, once we had RHEL 9 content, we would switch EPEL 9 to build against RHEL 9. This was a little bit more complicated for the implementation side, not too bad, but at least we weren't doing a mass rebuild. So I already hit that mass rebuild part. This was much more simple to explain to packagers. Just target EPEL 9. Later on, you might run into a case where your package doesn't install on CentOS anymore. So in that case, target EPEL 9 next, which is the same instructions we've already given them for EPEL 8 next. It was also going to be a simpler message for users. Just use EPEL 9 everywhere. Even on CentOS, they don't even have to think about it really because EPEL release has a recommends to pull in EPEL next release whenever you install it on CentOS. So it was still just super straightforward and what they were used to doing. And the same way it works on CentOS Stream 8. The biggest thing was that this let us launch before RHEL instead of after RHEL and gave us EPEL on day one of the RHEL 9 launch. But first, we launched EPEL 9. It's about 5.5, 6 months before RHEL 9. And this is the first time that's ever happened. And it was really only possible because of the changes in CentOS. We wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. Right away, we started getting questions like, so is EPEL 9 really ready? Or how could you call it ready if this package I care about isn't in there? Like, what are you thinking? And it gave us a good opportunity to remind people, EPEL isn't a specific content set. It's a repository. It's our repository for all of us to add stuff to it, community maintained packages that we want to use on enterprise Linux distros. It's up to individual package maintainers to add their packages into EPEL. A lot of times those packagers are primarily focused on Fedora. They don't mind building a compatible build in EPEL, but they usually won't do it proactively. They'll wait for someone to file a bug and ask for it. They have no problem doing it, but they just want to make sure that there's demand for it and that software is still appropriate to be shipped. That's done by filing bugs. If you saw Brian's talk just before this one, he talked about how CentOS now we're trying to start those conversations and have engagement, not just having as is, use it, and you get what you get community. So we have a guide now. We actually had it before we launched Rel 9. Troy over there wrote most of it. And it is kind of a choose your own adventure guide of how you start that bug, the specific buttons in Bugzilla you need to click for people that are less familiar with it, and also ways about how to, if you're just a user, ways you can phrase it, templates you can use. If you're already a package maintainer, how you can ask, I'd like you to add this, but if you don't want to do it, I'm a maintainer, you can add me and I'll do it. Things like that. Really, the big thing we wanted to focus on there was that the way CentOS was changing was we wanted to have those conversations and not just be a usage thing. And we wanted to mirror that in EPEL 9 or EPEL in general and start having a better onboarding process to start those conversations. That worked out pretty well. Fast forward about 6 months, Rel 9 launched, and EPEL 9 being out early allowed the community to populate that repo and have a lot of packages, community maintained packages ready to use on day one of Rel 9. We got up to about, I checked it that day, had to go back and look at the tweet I did about it to find the exact number because I didn't write it down anywhere else. But we were over 5,700 packages from over 2,600 source packages. That made, obviously that made a lot of community members and a lot of Rel customers very happy. It went from, okay, well, I don't really consider the next Rel major version until, 9.1, 9.2. That's when all the EPEL packages I need are available, to, hey, I could actually start using this now, earlier. And ideally, those customers started looking at it even sooner with CentOS Stream 9 and knew what was going to be in 9.0 and were already even more ready and filing EPEL requests beforehand. So how is EPEL 9 doing now? I stole this chart from mine and Troy's State of EPEL talk. It's a little bit shrunk down, so it's harder to see, but you can see the basic trend lines, and that's what's important. The first line here is EPEL 7, and then EPEL 8 and EPEL 9, and you can see how the trajectory changes. Also of note, EPEL 7 started about at Rel 7 launch. EPEL 8 actually didn't start till a little bit after the Rel 8 launch. And EPEL 9 got to start before the Rel 9 launch. These dotted lines here show about how many packages were in EPEL 9 at the time of the Rel launch. And if you go back previously, it took EPEL 8 about a year to get to the same number of packages. It took EPEL 7 about a year and a half to get to the same number of packages. So just tremendous growth, and it's what we're learning is launching early is better. Give people time to get their work done. Oh, and what we're up to now, just checked it this morning. We're up over 7,400 packages built from 3,300 source packages. So fantastic growth there. So you might be wondering, what about EPEL 10? Our plan right now is that we're going to do that the same way we did EPEL 9. We'll build it against CentOS initially, and then once Rel 10 is available, we'll build it against that. We're thinking we might be able to have the infrastructure set up a little bit sooner and let early adopters start poking at it and doing builds, but we probably won't publicize it or do an official announcement until about the same time, about 6 months before Rel 10. Before that point, there's a lot of churn in CentOS as it's getting developed off from the Fedora release. There's a lot of things changing. One big example in 9 was we were working to get OpenSSL 3 in there. If we'd have launched EPEL 9 before that change, pretty much every package builds that links against OpenSSL 3 would have to be rebuilt. So we want to avoid launching it before large changes like that land. So it's a balancing act. We want to get it available early, but not too early. So we have a survey going on right now. If you use EPEL or contribute to EPEL or think you might want to do either of those things, take our survey. We want your feedback. We want to hear what we're doing good, what we're doing bad, and how you're using EPEL. We're going to use that information to shape how we do things in the future. Those links go to the same spot. One's just easier to remember, tinyurl.com/Apple Survey 2022. And the QR code takes you to the same spot if you're scanning it. No rush to do it. It's open through the end of August. We wanted to have it open for this conference and also Fedora's Flock last 2 weeks ago. And I went through these slides way faster than I practiced. So, but there's my contact info again. And does anyone have any questions? Sure.
Are you tracking numbers of like how much churn there is that requires the use of Apple Next from one minor release to another for stuff like that?
Ongoing, no. We've done some spot checks on it. This is a little more sensitive. We've done some spot checks on it. I mentioned the 1% number.
Yeah.
I've checked it 2 or 3 times, and the library SO names in between RHEL and CentOS are very, very similar. Like library SO name bumps, the things that would require a rebuild in Apple Next, don't happen very often, but they can happen. And now we've got a place where we can, as that happens differently, we can get that build done and have it compatible. But it's still really an edge case. It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
Yes, QT is the big hairy exception.
Wasn't really a question. I was just saying the QT, they're trying to, it's not really the SO name. It's that one of the things is marked private. And anyway, they're trying to make it so that doesn't happen as often.
See, what happened was.
Yeah, I won't go into too much details, but they're working on it so that doesn't happen.
Excellent. Any other questions? We got one back here.
So how long does it take for add a new package into Apple?
So that depends. It can be pretty quick. If that package is already in Fedora and the maintainer's willing, you can file the bug. They can request a branch. Release engineering will create the branch. The maintainer will create the build. They'll create a Bodhi update, and they can publish it. Theoretically, all of this could happen on the same day. So it could happen really quickly. It'll show up in the testing repository first, and then that's in Bodhi. There's a karma system where you can upvote it, and if enough people upvote it, it'll get shipped out to the stable repository. Like I said, theoretically, this could all happen same day. That's the fastest it could happen. If there's no karma and no feedback on it, it stays in the testing repo for a week. So I would say within a month's probably a realistic expectation a lot of times, just to give people, the maintainer, time to do the build, things like that. If it doesn't exist in Fedora yet, that's a lot harder. It needs to be submitted to Fedora. Apple, we're not really interested in having packages different than what Fedora has. There's a whole mentality inside Red Hat called upstream first. And so if you want to add a new package, the right thing to do is get it in Fedora first. Even if you don't even use Fedora, you should get it in that collection of packages, have it maintained with the help from the community, and then maintain the one you care about in Apple, but make sure the Fedora one keeps building. You do the new updates there. There's a package review process there. If you're brand new, you need to get sponsored by a packager into the packager group. And so, yeah, it can take a little bit longer on that side, but we have a lot of helpful people in the community, myself included, that we're sponsors, and we like packaging. That's what we care about. And so we like getting more people involved and spreading that workload out. Just at the last conference I went to, I met someone new in the Alma community. We got to talking about packaging. He got to talking about things he was frustrated with. And I was like, okay, well, why don't you file this bug? Why don't you request that? And now, fast forward, he's gotten hooked on it. I sponsored him in the packager group. He's adding packages left and right, building them for Apple 9, 8, and even 7. His infrastructure spread out between several of those releases. And so that's what we want to see. We want to see more people get involved, because Apple it's our repository, just like Fedora is our distribution. It's not just for something that somebody gives to you.
Thanks.
Sure.
Sorry, I don't mean to comment on all those. Me and Carl often do code talks. I just wanted to comment one thing, so you don't think it's automatically going to be there a month. There's several packages, over 100, where the Fedora maintainer has no desire to do it and they just sit there. But that is in our process. We have had, you send an email to Apple Devel, and majority of those people have stepped up and grabbed it. But sometimes there is a delay if the maintainer doesn't care.
Yes, a month isn't the upper limit. That's my guesstimate at probably the average.
Yeah. I've definitely done one or two with one day, but that's the rare exception.
I know David had a question back here too.
I was wondering if there were any, if there was any interest or activity going on around doing some sort of an artificial intelligence review of the use, like any tracking associated with the repositories themselves.
Haven't looked into that, but I'd like to pick your brain about more what you mean by that.
We'll talk to Gabriel here.
All right. Anybody else? Sure. Keep them coming.
Yeah. So this may sound like a trick question, but what are some of the packages that people end up requesting a lot really early? Like, did you notice any of them at the very beginning of Apple 9 that were
Sure.
really, really popular?
I'm trying to remember mine and Troy's slide from the dojo a few days ago. We had a bunch of the logos on there. People don't really have time to ask for KDE because Troy's on that like in his sleep before it even can happen. So KDE's out quickly, but I know that's popular. XFCE gets asked about a lot. Mate and Cinnamon get asked about a lot. OpenVPN was a real popular one.
Yep.
I know a lot of hatters depend on that to get connected with the work VPN, and that's not shipped in RHEL. And so really, yes. It's in the CSB image, but it's not in RHEL proper. So Screen's another one.
That's one of the first ones that shows
Yes.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, Screen is one of those examples where Red Hat kind of decided we don't need to maintain two solutions, tmux and Screen. We're going to focus our engineering resources on one. So Screen got retired out of RHEL, and that means, hey, now it's eligible to be in EPEL when it wasn't before. Any others? Well, if not, then that's all, folks. Oh, one more comment. Or that's not all, folks.
Is there a process for taking packages out of EPEL? Like, do packages eventually get retired out?
Yes. So I mentioned how if a package gets added in like a RHEL minor release, it has to come out of EPEL by our policy. It's extra packages only. We don't want to have part of the reason EPEL is so popular and so trusted is because it doesn't have problems that some third-party repos have where they add something and it's doing a new version that you didn't expect, or you added the repo for package A, but then package B also got a new major version and that changed expectations for what else you wanted to do. So we try really hard to stick with the extra packages only. That's one example where something would be retired. A less common example, but does happen, is that the maintainer just says, I don't really want to maintain this in EPEL anymore. It's an all volunteer effort, so we can't force anyone to maintain it. Or maybe the software has security vulnerabilities that, if it were a RHEL package, the RHEL maintainers doing it full time, being paid to do it, would develop a backported fix for it for that version. But the upstream only publishes the fix for the latest major version that's incompatible. In that case, the maintainer could say, I don't know how to backport this, or maybe it's impossible to backport it, so let's just retire it so people aren't using vulnerable software. In Fedora, you can retire a package only in rawhide and branched, I believe. Once it's in a stable Fedora release, you have to maintain it for the life cycle of that Fedora release, but that's only 13 months. Obviously, EPEL, the life cycle matches RHEL 10 years, so we're not going to say you have to maintain this for 10 years. That's not reasonable. So we don't want people retiring packages early, but we're not going to force them, and it is allowed to retire a package out of EPEL for security reasons, or if you just don't want to maintain it anymore. Ideally, in that case, someone would post about it to like the mailing list or talk about it in NIRC or Matrix and find somebody else that'd be willing to co-maintain it with them. So rather than retiring it and then somebody else asking to bring it back and then they maintaining it, just skip the retirement and transfer transfer. I don't want to say ownership. We don't own packages. We maintain them, but transfer like the admin rights so that somebody new can maintain the package.
Yeah, I have a great example of that where I was I have a tightly maintained group. And so in order for that group of packages to get built, because there were several different maintainers, we just basically created administrative associated rights on all of them for everybody.
Anybody else? What else have you wondered about Apple? Well, if that's it, then that's all, folks. Like I said, my contact info, reach out if you're interested in becoming a packager for Fedora or Apple or both. I can help you get started.
Thank you.